A Unionist peace party plot aimed at revolt against the Confederate government in Texas was discovered in September 1862, in the North Texas area including Cook, Grayson, Wise, Denton, and Collin counties. Prompt action by local authorities broke up the organization in October 1862. Following a declaration of martial law in Cook County, a citizens' court, or jury, of 12 men composed of Army officers and civilians was formed at Gainesville. It found 39 of the participants guilty and sentenced them to be hanged for conspiracy and insurrection. 3 other prisoners who were members of military units were permitted trial by court-martial as they requested and were subsequently hanged by its order. Since that time, the only reliable and lengthy account of the awesome event has been the one written by a member of the jury, Thomas Barrett, The Great Hanging at Gainesville, Cook County, Texas, October 1862, Gainesville, 1885. An extremely rare item of Texana, it was reprinted in 1961 by the Texas State Historical Association. Soon after the Great Hanging, George Washington Diamond, a newspaper editor and publisher of Henderson, who had joined the Confederate Army, took leave from his regiment, the 3rd Texas Cavalry, to visit in Cook County where his brother, James J. Diamond, Lieutenant Colonel of the 11th Texas Cavalry, had assisted in the discovery of the conspiracy. George W. Diamond was asked by his brother and other members of the Gainesville court to write a full account of the peace party plot and the trials of the conspirators. The original records of the court were turned over to him to be used as the basis of his chronicle. Shortly after the end of the Civil War, he began this account, the final draft of which was completed, as internal evidence indicates, sometime between February 1, 1874, and December 20, 1876. Diamond was then living at Whitesboro, Grayson County, where he died in 1911. Since Diamond's death, the unpublished manuscript in his handwriting has remained in the custody of his heirs. Its existence was made known recently by a granddaughter, Mrs. Harry Harlan of Dallas. Because of the author's intent expressed in the manuscript to lay his compilation before the bar of history, Mr. and Mrs. Harlan have allowed the work to be edited for publication. By reason of its generous detail, it is a valuable complementary piece to the Barrett account. Behind the Great Hanging at Gainesville lies a sequence of events and movements local, state, and in the broadest sphere of the nation itself that bear significantly upon its occurrence. They were the same developments that had led already to the secession of Texas and other southern states, the formation of the Confederacy, and the outbreak of war between North and South. As early as the annexation of Texas to the Union in 1845, the state and its people had become embroiled directly in the bitter intersectional disputes then raging over the question of slavery. But it was not until the late 1850s that the area of North Texas in which Gainesville and Cook County lay became a battleground in the preliminaries to armed conflict. The reason for this delay is indicated largely by the character and background of most of its inhabitants at the time. The settlers in this isolated, frontier region of Texas were mainly small farmers and mechanics, most of them drawn from Kentucky, Illinois, Indiana, Tennessee, Missouri, and other border states by the lure of free land to Texas. Few of them owned any Negro slaves. Most were indifferent, or even opposed, to the institution of slavery. Cook County was only one of some 10 or 11 contiguous counties settled in whole or in part by persons with the same general background. The counties comprised what had long been known as the Forks of the Trinity area. Measuring roughly 100 miles square, it extended southward from the Red River to a line below the cities of Dallas and Fort Worth. There was also settled within it a small but forceful minority with differing background and outlook. These persons had come chiefly from the longer settled areas of eastern Texas or from states in the deep south. They tended to prefer land in the rich bottoms of the main river courses rather than in the open prairie country. Their farms were basically cotton plantations. This minority group owned almost all of the Negro slaves introduced into the area, and it was as strongly pro-Southern in sentiment as any group of Mississippi or Georgia cotton planters. Viewed nationally, it was obvious that the opening of the territory of Kansas to white settlement in the 1850s had produced a bloodstained rehearsal of Civil War itself. Reverberations of that struggle between free soil partisans and abolitionists on the one hand and pro-slavery, extreme states' rights men on the other were felt sharply in North Texas. The people in the northernmost counties of Cook, Montague, Grayson, and Fannin were closer, in fact, to the bleeding ground of Kansas than to their own state capital at Austin. Little more than 200 miles of Indian Territory, present Oklahoma, separated them from the fratricidal strife to the north. Reflections in North Texas of the troubles in Kansas were confined at first to non-violent contests for the minds of inhabitants. The principal threat, in the eyes of the pro-Southern extremists, was found in the abolitionist evangels from beyond the state. Most of these were itinerant preachers of various denominations who urged an end to slavery on moral or religious grounds. Ministers of the Methodist Episcopal Church, by then referred to as the Northern Methodist Church, were especially suspect. The northern counties of Texas also were the only part of the state in which this parent branch of American Methodism insisted upon maintaining a conference, or organization of local churches, in the face of objections from the younger Methodist Episcopal Church, South. The contest on a statewide scale between pro-slavery extremists and die-hard Unionists in Texas remained primarily political as expressed at the ballot box. But it reached a new high in 1859 when Sam Houston, as the champion of Union and the Constitution, defeated Hardin R. Runnels' bid for a second term as governor. Houston had no more solid support than in the North Texas counties, whose people felt that his victory at the polls largely had settled the question of Texas taking part in any rift of the Union. But pro-slavery leaders in the North Texas area by that time felt goaded to register their sentiments outside the polling booths. In April of 1859, the annual conference of the Northern Methodist Church embracing northern Texas met on Brushy Creek in Fannin County. A mass meeting held simultaneously in the county seat of Bonham denounced the conference. Several hundred members then proceeded by horseback the 5 miles to the conference meeting. There the mob forced the Reverend Anthony Bewley, chief minister on the Texas mission, and other delegates including the presiding bishop, to disperse. The churchmen were warned that blood would flow if they continued their ministry in Texas. The temper of the pro-slavery men was inflamed further the same year when John Brown staged his raid on Harper's Ferry in Virginia some months later. It was the presidential contest of 1860, though, that hastened a showdown in the long intersectional dispute. The ill-fated Democratic National Convention, meeting at Charleston that spring, split hopelessly over the selection of national standard bearers, thus opening the way to victory for nominees of the recently formed Republican Party. The Republican nomination of Abraham Lincoln for president was taken as a direct challenge to Southern secessionists, a turn viewed with the gravest concern by pro-Southern leaders in North Texas. In the interval between Lincoln's nomination and his election in November 1860, public opinion in North Texas was greatly agitated by an unexplained civil commotion. Early in the afternoon of Sunday, July 8, a series of fires broke out at almost the same moment in Dallas, Denton, Pilot Point, Waxahachie, Kaufman, and several other towns in North Texas. No one knew, or would admit, who started the blazes. The economic loss, particularly in Dallas where the fire got beyond control, was heavy. Although Governor Houston minimized the importance of the fires, pro-Southern leaders of the area pointed to them as part of a projected slave uprising planned and fostered, it was charged, by abolitionist preachers. At Dallas, a vigilante committee of 52 tried and hanged 3 Negro slaves accused of complicity. At Fort Worth, another mob captured and hanged the Reverend Anthony Bewley, following discovery of a letter purporting to link the presiding elder of the Northern Methodist Church with a secret order, referred to as the Red Circle. The order was said to be dedicated to the extinction of Texas slave owners and their followers. Lincoln's election in November led to demands for immediate secession in Texas and other southern states, but the firm Unionist stand by Governor Houston delayed the issue from coming to a head in Texas until February 23, 1861. On that date, a statewide referendum was held on an ordinance adopted by the State Secession Convention at Austin to sever the Union of Texas with the United States. James J. Diamond was one of Cook County's 3 delegates to that convention. He also was named a member of the convention's Committee of Public Safety, which, during a 6-week recess of the convention, became in effect the Revolutionary Government of Texas. Through its agents and armed forces, it compelled the surrender of all United States troops and forts in the state even before the statewide vote on secession was taken. Although Texas as a whole voted for secession by a margin of 46,129 to 14,697 ballots, 19 of the 122 organized counties cast majorities against it. 8 of these opposing counties were in North Texas, including Cook County, which voted 221 to 137 against withdrawing from the Union. Grayson, Collin, Montague, Fannin, Wise, Jack, and Lamar counties also rejected the ordinance of secession. But Dallas, where the worst of the fires of the previous year had occurred, voted by a margin of 741 to 237 votes for secession. Tarrant County, in which Bewley had been executed at Fort Worth, followed the lead of Dallas by a vote of 462 to 127. In spite of this split among the counties in the Forks of the Trinity area, public opinion appeared to be unified there in support of the Confederacy, once the 2 sections of the nation were plunged into war. Notwithstanding the heavy registration of opposition to secession in Cook and adjoining counties, most of the men of fighting age rallied to the armed defense of their state and the Confederacy. Many of those who had been most pronounced against secession took up arms against the Union. After the firing upon Fort Sumter in April 1861, the state government at Austin moved to put Texas on a war footing. In May, Colonel William C. Young, a veteran of the Mexican War and a Cook County planter living in the Civils Bend area along the Red River, was ordered to raise a regiment of 1,000 men from 10 North Texas counties, including Cook, Grayson, Collin, and Denton counties. Designated for the protection of the northern border, Young's 11th Texas Cavalry moved shortly into the Indian Country to capture the United States outposts of Forts Washita, Cobb, and Arbuckle, thus becoming the occupying force that held the area between Kansas and Texas. By December 1861, the Texas legislature passed a general act providing for the internal security of the state. 33 brigade districts were created by the act. District number 1 comprised Cook, Montague, Wise, Denton, Jack, and 13 other north and northwestern counties, with headquarters at Gainesville. As commanding officer of the district, William Hudson, a 40-year-old native of South Carolina and a longtime resident in Cook County, was appointed brigadier general. It is significant that although Confederate state authorities took for granted that North Texans were united in loyalty to the new government, the military units raised in the area were officered primarily by those with long-held Southern sentiments. This policy extended from the commanding general at Gainesville through the companies raised in each county. Thus in and from Cook County were such undoubted Southern spokesmen as Hudson, William C. Young, James J. Diamond, James G. Borland, the aging Daniel Montague's son-in-law, William C. Twitty, and others equally reliable in strategic command of military units in the area. It is against this background of events and movements that the Peace Party plot was discovered and acted upon in the fall of 1862. In writing his account of the Great Hanging, George W. Diamond sought to justify the establishment of the court and the severity of its judgments. In his mind, as in those of members of the court who aided him in the preparation of his narrative, the Citizens' Court was not an extra-legal vigilant group, or mob, but an orderly constituted body which acted with regard for due process of law in carrying out its frightful duty. In this, the Diamond account differs markedly in tenor from the account written some 10 years later by Thomas Barrett, with which the reader may compare it profitably.